Okay, Audi time. Now, we've been driving and beating on this thing and breaking things in the background, but we're just sorting more of the car out to try and get it as reliable as possible. We honestly did pick the wrong car because the parts for this car are very, very rare. And they're getting even more rare because this car is getting older and older. The only things we really haven't broken yet are the transmission and the rear end. And that's because we've always used Pennzoil full synthetic, 75 140 for the rear end and 75 W90 for the transmission. There is nothing wrong with this transmission. We're gonna pull this back out again, have a spare drive line for us. The way this car is set up, we can have the engine and transmission in and out in about 45 minutes with 3 guys. But we did find that we are losing time in our shifts because of that manual 01E. So we called our buddy Peter from Drive Sport. Peter's gonna show you step by step what is all involved in building a dog box for it, which is a much more robust transmission. It's going to be able to handle the extra power that we're now starting to finally get out of this car. I'm so excited. Let's get into it. Here we go.
So same shop, new stuff in it. Looks a bit different. So what do we got?
We have an 01E 6-speed dog box here with the T56 spline. So that's like, pretty standard Chevy spline. The most important thing is you have optimized ratios, medium gear set, and you'd be using that for shorter circuits and hill climb cars. So with the dogs, you'll get really fast shifts, and with this gear layout, the torque gaps between the gears will be smaller. So your applied torque will be pretty smooth throughout the whole power band.
Wow, nice.
Yeah.
Four-wheel drive, 4-turbo, LS swap goodness. We are also going to take a driving course.
Keep it tight, keep it tight, keep it tight.
I need to think more like a race car driver and less like a truck driver.
The power band is going to change dramatically with this.
We got the boost coming in properly now, but it's not exiting properly. That's pretty, Petey.
So
There's a lot of difference.
there's a huge difference here. The first thing most people will see is the difference in the size of the gears. The width of the gear may be different and larger, but your tooth size is substantially different. So you have more teeth on the OEM one. They're helical cut and they're ground, so they're going to be very quiet. On the racing box, the profile is different. They're hobbed and they're straight cut. Not that these aren't hobbed, but that's how they're finished. They're not ground, so you get a little more noise, but the noise also comes from several other factors, like the contact ratio. But nonetheless, this is a racing gearbox. That's the #1 priority, right? So much larger input shaft splines, so that allows you to run a larger center hub for your clutches, and then you can also use a lot of different manufacturers. Like a common one is a Tilton. Tilton make a clutch disc for this. You also have the profile here in the shaft is improved. Of course, material is improved as well. One of my favorite features here of this unit, so we have first gear and second gear. If we see this feature between second and the reverse teeth, that's a common point of failure.
Like no man's land there?
Yeah, but here you have a very, very beautiful profile. And mechanically, that's much stronger. So it'll handle the forces much better, or I should say torque. So there's way more material on the bottom of that tooth, whereas here there's not. And
Would that have been better designed from factory to have that go all the way up?
I mean, these gear sets have been seen on cars that have over 600 horsepower. Like, they are stout.
Right.
But when you start drag racing them, put radials on them, and sidestepping clutches, I mean, then you're going to run into these problems.
Right. You got to step up.
The manufacturability of this is significantly different than that. So it's much more costly to. So next thing would be the dogs. You can see OEM synchro. So we don't have any synchros on these gears. So your shift fork's going to be here. That's in the neutral state. That's third. And so when you hear a clunk of the dog box, you can almost imagine that dog gear engaging like that. And there's a very slight back cut on these. So as you're applying engine torque, it actually draws the dog in and holds it in. And when you let off, that's where you have to let off. So even if it's a sequential transmission, like on a Porsche Cup car or whatnot,
Yeah.
when they engage their gear change or downshift, be it an H pattern or sequential, there still needs to be a torque cut to allow the dogs to release and have the slider go over to the next gear.
Right. It's almost
So
like a barb holding it in.
It's super important you have a torque cut.
Yeah.
Yeah. So either you have something, a sensor on your gear lever or on your clutch. Most people see, this is a Volkswagen transmission, you know, you've got your input shaft, your engine torque comes through here, and then 1 through 4 are here, and 5 and 6 on these two shafts. So this shrinks the whole case down. You don't have 1 through 6 this way. This is a front wheel drive transaxle, input shaft, output shaft, ring gear.
Right.
Okay. But on the all-wheel drive transaxles, it's a little different. This is actually a counter shaft. So the front final drive runs through here. There's a bunch of bearings and a tapered bearing here that runs on the pinion gear for the front final drive.
Right.
So, you know, machining this also, because there's quite a bit of tolerance on that, and the depth of it, there's a machine surface about halfway through. They're not cheap kits, but they do work well.
Yeah.
And they've proven themselves in many builds now.
Strong, beefy, better design.
Yeah, and the materials.
material.
I can't comment on what exactly it is. That's the manufacturer's secret.
Yeah.
But it's working well. All right, Debocho Garage, 01E, 6-speed Dogbox about to go down. So we're gonna take apart this core transmission, check to make sure nothing is seriously wrong with it. So we just have a typical radial play in the input shaft, just by feeling by hand right now. No axial play. I hear something loose in there. Not sure what that could be. Sounds like a hardened ring of some sort that could be floating around. I don't know, we'll find out. It's definitely been rebuilt. There's a non-standard group here. It does look good though, but you know what? You never know until you see inside. So let's take apart the accessories. We'll do the flanges, the T-dent springs, the shifter, cover, and then we'll start on the end and have a look inside. Let's see if I can do this relatively quick. Oops. All right, so we've got some shims and a Belleville washer to preload the center diff. So bearing looks good. This should come out relatively easily. There you go. Looking good. These are commonly pitted. Looking pretty good. Some minor pitting here. I'm gonna take this little oil galley, pull it straight up. There's no ring right here. Pull it straight up, down, on the oblique side. Out it comes. So there's our 12-point bolt in there. We've got to loosen that off, and I believe that's around 110 foot-pounds. We need to engage 2 gears at the same time, and then we can crack that pretty easily. Need some better tools, better workbench, cleaner shop. Need a lot of things. All right, there we go. That was fairly effortless. Okay. So next what we have to do is pull that out. If it's been rebuilt, the transmission, we want to make sure this 12-point nut's in good shape. We got Loctite on it. applied properly, seems like. Yeah. All right, next we're gonna loosen these torques. There's 5 here on the outside and then 2 on the inside. Okay, this is cracked, but the bearing at the end of the input shaft is pressed into this case, and the input shaft is stationary to the main case. So we now have to split this. We got to pull this case off. Don't make fun of the tool I use for this. It's not even straight, is it? Okay, you got the long bolts here. And inside we have 2 magnets. Ooh. Maybe that broken piece I heard in there was a broken synchro ring. Ooh, very possible. Okay. Looking good so far. I've seen better bearing cones before. Okay, so we've got to pull 5th and 6th off. There's definitely some damage, something brass here. This looks like it got super hot. There's some evidence of that. Not sure why. Did it run out of oil? Oh yeah. So there's some extreme pitting here. Oh, this transmission ran out of oil. Look at the surface damage on that. Maybe it ran out of oil. Let's use that as our current theory. All right. Okay, simple tool I made. Little bolt that goes in there. Allows you to pull the gears off. I do try. Okay. Nothing fancy for gear pullers. Okay, so key here is you gotta be very careful when you're pulling on these gears that you are not going to damage. Okay, this is going nice and easy. Okay. All right. We got some rust in here. Nothing special, folks. Yeah, look, we got rust in here. So maybe this thing just sat and cycled through the seasons. How does this synchro go? Look, that's dry as a bone. It's brand new. This just got rebuilt, I guess. Let's get this gear off. And there she goes. Tolerance is tight, so gotta pull evenly. All right, so we gotta, oh, hot dog, something got hot. Look at that. That looks like a new gear. So I'm gonna say this thing got fried at some point. Barf. All right, so now I'm going to remove the shift fork for 5/6. I'm gonna push the rod down because when I tap this, I want the smallest possible moment arm between this rolled dowel and the edge, so less likely of bending the shift rod. Hasn't happened yet. Okay. Okay. I don't want to interfere with the gear. So at this point, we are going to grab selected rod, bring that back up. So now we have clearance. Start keeping these things together. There is an orientation to this, so up, and you want to mark that if you want to. And this is kind of funny, but yeah, it is asymmetrical. Someone's already taken this part. You see they've marked the shift fork, so that's great. I'll take their help on that. Here's my plastic hammer. Okay, yeah, dry synchro. So that, you know, when you assemble these, putting oil on these synchros, because they got to bed in. So I know, you know, you're gonna put oil in the box, but it takes a while to splash through, and they have to soak in the oil. So, you know, they're carbon lined or some okay, call it a friction material. Not sure exactly what, but if they're not soaked in oil prior, you could score them right off the get-go. Okay, now this is a pain in the arse. We got to pull this collar and this hub for a 5/6 synchro sleeve off. Beauty. Okay. Beauty. Okay. Yeah, this thing got cooked at some point. You got these springs in here. Beauty. Okay. Brand new gear. Brand new gear. Unused. Okay. So GoPro camera died just as we removed a 6th gear. Like this is a new gear, as was the counter gear. So next step is to remove this little C-clip. I've done it before in one shot, and I've also spent 20 minutes doing it before. Have I gotten better at it? Probably not. Okay, but there is access for it that holds a bearing collar in for the mid case on the input shaft. After that is done, what I will be doing is putting a clamp right here, because this is the hollow shaft. In here is the pinion shaft that runs to the front ring gear. Okay, so if you don't fasten this, then this will fall through, and then you'll lose all your needle bearings. Okay, so you got to do that. And this gear's pressed on. Obviously, I mean, it's splined on, so I don't want to hammer anything, push anything. What I do when I remove this whole section, all these shafts will come out, including the forks and the rods. The last thing we do is we compress this out on the press with mid case sitting on the press stand. Just push this down if we have to. So I got to undo all of those Torx bolts and put the clamp up here. But like I said, clip, clamp, Torx bolts, remove the mid case, and then we can see some more. We've got the mid case out of the bell housing, and like I said, we clamped the pinion gear in through the hollow shaft so it wouldn't come out. There's a needle bearing in here, so all the needles would come out. I mean, it's serviceable, but it's just a pain. We took off the circlip. I guess we could have done that later, but I did anyways. Hose clamped this, took those bolts out, and unfortunately this transmission thumbs down. So probably one of the worst I've seen. On the drive side of the pinion, we have major scoring. I suspect this transmission ran out of oil, was run but subsequently rebuilt. So, you know, you can also see the scoring on that ring gear. So unfortunately, of all the parts from the core that we require to build a dog box, the ring and pinion is one of them. So we gotta do another core. Another core it is. Sorry to boss. This one is. Okay, here we got Debocho's 6-speed 01E gear set. So this is what we're going to be installing into the case that we've prepared. So we have the input shaft, and we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Same thing goes on the output shaft. And we've got some shift forks here. Plated LSD, so clutch plated LSD, not a torsion style. That's going to be going on the 411 ring gear. Some bearings of all the internals from the transmission. We've got what needed to get modified for the transmission. So we had to take down reverse gear. So it would clear, so this idler would clear the larger first gear. The rods had to be milled down to match the change in the throw of the dog ring. It's slightly different than OEM. So the manufacturers specified that, and we've welded up and machined a window into the shift drum here, so as to prevent engaging two gears at once. So we don't want to do that, obviously. Here's the case. So that's been hot tanked and blasted. When I sandblast these cases, I 3D print little covers, for example, for the flanges here, flange seals. So when I blast the case, I'm minimizing the opportunity for the media to get into the case. We don't want that. It's just extra work. But what does help is after the hot tanking, there is no oil in there. So the media does come out well. So you just wash it with hot water again, hot tank it or clean it out. But yeah, having 3D printed covers for these locations is a big help. Just a little bit more touch-up work to do on this case before we start assembling. We have to, and these ones have been painted. This one's going to stay bare aluminum. But the first step will be taking the bearing off of the counter shaft. We're going to reuse this one. It's in good condition. There's no harm in doing that. We're going to slip that onto the counter shaft just above first gear here. So these gears are going to come off. We'll press that bearing on, and then we're going to check the preload on the input shaft. So that bearing race runs where my thumb is, and it preloads the pinion gear bearing right there. So that's what we're going to start with. Once we get that, we will do the preload on the differential. So obviously you install the ring gear, torque the bolts down, preload the bearings on the differential. Once that's done, we're going to check our backlash. If the backlash checks out, then we'll do a quick contact pattern check, and we're going to move on with final assembly. Final assembly will more or less start with having the gear set assembled in the mid housing. It's going to slip down into the bell housing, and then we're going to stack gears 5 and 6 on top. Here's our new counter shaft, pretty beefy unit. So if we compare our gears, now the Audi O1E gears are pretty big, but the tooth profile on these is much larger. But what I really want to get at is the dog engagement system. So here you have the dog ring between first and second. So you can see some of the machined features into that. This here is for the reverse idler gear to engage with. So this mechanism is going to, your shift fork will slide in this groove, and you're going to engage second gear. So often when you hear dog boxes, you hear a clunk, and that really is these two faces engaging like that. Now that clunk resonates a little louder through the driveline. So when the car's running, it can be pretty aggressive clunk, but that's normal with dog boxes. But what's interesting is these back cuts, or these profiles on these dogs. You can see these back cuts complement each other. So as this dog ring comes up into first gear, you're going to engage those two dogs, and the torque, the engine torque, is going to lock them together. And that's what's going to keep this shift hub from falling apart. So that's why it's really important when you go to disengage one gear and move to another, that you release the engine torque, because that engine torque is going to allow you to pull that off. If you don't, you're likely going to bend a shift fork or damage your shifting mechanism. So that's why the torque cut on the shift is super important. Now there's a few strategies to do that. Just manually is letting the throttle off or tapping the clutch lightly. Most cars these days will use some kind of strain gauge or some micro switch, but it is critical when you're driving this that you keep that in mind. And I'm sure a lot of the guys that have been driving these now, or any dog box for that matter, not just this one, can attest to having to do that. Just one more thing to think about, but if you want to go fast, that's the price you pay. Okay, so we've got the tapered roller bearing removed off the original counter shaft. Now I've got it warmed up. I'm gonna just flop it on. It comes straight down. Perfect. Okay. And then we'll just press that on the remainder of the way. Yeah, so we've got tapered roller bearing on the counter shaft. The way I did that is I took this collar, comes with the gear kit, I pressed it on, sleeved my gear on, and then I put this in the gear puller inverted, and I used the shop press with very little tonnage just to press the bearing down without hitting it. Okay, so now we're going to take our counter shaft and we're going to put it on our pinion gear. Now this is the stock pinion gear. So we've got a bunch of these loose rollers here we got to be careful of. A spring washer, a roller bearing here we can't forget about. So this tapered surface is going to run on that roller bearing. There you go. So now we have our 1 through 4th situated on that pinion gear. Okay, we're going to put this little hose clamp on. This is going to prevent those rollers from popping out. So we've got the counter shaft with the pinion gear in the bell housing. We can see the pinion gear coming through here on the bottom. I've got 2 dowels in, some new 12mm dowels. I've set them down a bit, so when I put the mid plate on, I'm not fighting them to take them off. So they've been punched down a bit just to give me the location, but not to interfere too much with the process. Okay, so here's our midsection with the bearing cone pressed into it. So the bearing cone for the counter shaft. However, I've removed the shims from under there so I can judge the preload accordingly. So what we're gonna do, okay, 4 bolts. So now there should be some axial play on this shaft. Absolutely. We'll rotate this a few times to settle the bearing. Make sure that's pressed all the way down. Okay. Okay. So average around 0.74, 0.75 millimeters of axial play. So we've got to add, I believe it's 0.15 of preload. So that takes us to 0.9. We need a 0.9 millimeter shim. If we look at the original stack up, we'll see how different it is from what it came with. So we're at a 1.091 for 2. 1.09, so likely a 1.1 shim, so 1.1 millimeter, but we are looking for a 0.9. So time to dig out a 0.9 millimeter shim from the stash. Okay, so I'm looking for a 0.9 millimeter shim stack, and I've got, what I found was a 0.6 from my Audi stash, and from some other diffs I assemble, I've made my own stainless steel shims, and one of those matches the Audi stash. So it is imperial grade, so it is a 0.012 thou, but that lines up to be 0.3 millimeters, and that's going to give me my appropriate shim stack height for this application. So this shim is going to sit under this cone, and that should give us our appropriate preload. We've finished the preload on the counter shaft. Now we're going to move along and do the preload on the differential bearings. So they've been installed.
The differential bolts have been torqued down to 100 Newton meters as per the manufacturer's specifications, and we've got new bearing installed on the differential. So I've got to put a known dimension shim in here for S2. So as per the factory description, S2. So I've got 1.05 millimeter shim in there. Then I'm going to install the bearing cup in here with no shim, and I'm going to check the axial play in the differential, and based on that, I'll based on the predetermined preload specifications, I'll put in the appropriate shim, and thereafter we check the backlash. Okay, so diff is in with S2 in place, shim 2 1.05 mil. We've got our diff in, no shim on the top on S1. We've got our flange in. We're going to check the play off the flange. I've got it bolted down so there isn't any play in the flange, eliminating all possible play. And I've got the plate bolted to the transmission. So we're going to get the measurement from that. We'll seat the bearing. So they say you should rotate it a few times. That might help get you more accurate results. And honestly, if that's what the manual says, that's where I've learned most of this, just factory manuals. So get the factory manuals and follow them. This is all from that. Okay, I have the backlash though. That's great. In one shot, I'm very close. So this is very much the upper range of what the manual's requesting. The manual is indicating between 0.12 and 0.22. So a bit too high for me, or too much backlash still. I'm going to try to get that around 0.15 to 0.18. So instead of doing all the math again, I know that I have the next shim size down, so I can go 0.85 and then increase by 0.05 on the other one. So our preload stays the same. We're just dropping the face of the ring gear onto the pinion just a little bit more to get a better backlash. In case you're wondering what my shim stash looks like, this is got some Audi and Volkswagen stuff right here. Boom, you need those in order to get it done, or else you're gonna be waiting and waiting for the dealership, or you can laser cut them. Okay, I think we did it. So we're at 0.18. So obviously you got to make sure the countershaft is not moving. So as we get to the smaller numbers, this all counts. 0.18. Like I mentioned, these are your acceptable ranges. I'm happy with that. That even is this maybe the smallest shim I have. Next, we're going to move to assembling the mid case. And really, this is what all comes together. Once we have that done, we'll do the rods, reverse gear, some of the detents. Then all of this gets placed back onto the bell housing. And then we have to work with 5th and 6th. So I have to take this off. You can see on the counter shaft, I already removed them. So gears 5 and 6 on the input are going to come off in order for us to install this. Okay, this might be helpful for anyone doing a regular rebuild as well. Assembling the mid case, my recipe is as follows. I install the counter shaft with the shift fork, but without the window for the shifter. So without that, then I install reverse gear, and then the input shaft, then the reverse lever and rod, and then the window for the 1-2 shift fork, and then it's all pretty much comes together. So there is a bit of an order to make this more seamless, and then this all gets flipped over on the bell housing. So, okay, counter shaft with the pinion gear, shift fork, I don't know if you can see it in there, shift fork with the rod. But again, this window, whatever you want to call it, okay, I've not installed that yet. It interferes too much with the rest of the assembly. So there's 2 more shift forks that go in there, and the one for reverse gear. So we leave that part out. I've got the reverse gear assembly in there, the machined reverse gears in place. You can see very carefully the bottom face of the reverse gear would impact top face of first gear, hence why it's machined maybe a mil or 2. We got the spring in there, the little dot here is showing on this plate that allows these pins to travel through. There's a chamfer on the bottom side of that plate, so this dot indicates that it's on the bottom side, so that's correct. I've got the input shaft in there. I slotted the input shaft with the shift fork and the 3/4 rod. I had the reverse gear rod just hovering in there, and the last thing I'm going to do is slide this one in there. Okay, there we go. You can tell the shift fork for 3/4 is correctly aligned. Okay, because the neutral detent is showing, and misaligned for reverse, but that can be done by adding the detent. So looking good here. We're going to install our input shaft bearing collar. That lines everything up. And then the window for this gear, but we got to put the snap ring on first. There's a ring there and then one over top. Mid case is on the bell housing. This is just a test fit. The last thing you want to do is seal it all up and then run through your gears, only to find out that, you know, something's happened along the way. So you can see the windows. Okay, the one that's sunk to the bottom is 5/6. So we'll ignore that one for now because we'll be able to see that on the outside, so I'm not concerned. We've got 5 and 6 installed. We've got the dowel pin in there. We've got the snap ring on top. We've got the bearing element right here. That's for the bearing on the top. Gets cinched down. So we are ready to install cover on the transmission. I really need to get a workbench or a stand for these transmissions, so I don't have to do this. Okay, 2 magnets. Magnets are going under, between those 2 bolt holes. 1, 2. Then we get this guy in here. Holds the magnets down. It's part of the case as well. Okay. And obviously super important is we get that part of the bearing in there. So the one I showed you earlier, that was the bottom half of this. This top, that's a ball bearing. And then right here we have a roller bearing. It's like a 2-part bearing. Pretty interesting. Just gonna tap that down to seat it, and then we'll torque it. Then we'll put the center diff in. So to this 12-point bolt, that gets tightened to 110 foot-pounds based off the manual. And the way we get that to stay static, or the gears, the shafts, sorry, without turning, just like when we took it apart, we engaged 2 gears at once. So that'll keep the shafts from spinning. Now the input shaft gets drawn up into the bearing, so you're gonna have to probably put a few rotations on it before you start torquing it down. So that's normal. And then everything should spin pretty free after. Initially you might find that the transmission's not spinning very well, at least the input shaft, because it's dropped down into the case. But when you draw this up, the shaft, everything's engaging as it should now. So once you've got that torqued down to 110 foot-pounds, we put in the center diff and the end cap. We are good to go. Just finish up with some seals, flanges, and the shift selector. Boom. Center diff, shift selector. We got the hall sensor in there, that's an extra one. We got a separate seal for this transmission. This input shaft's bigger. And that's just a plug I use for blasting.
So we're back at Andy's. Pete just dropped off the transmission. So we're gonna give Pete a ride. We got the boost coming in properly now, but it's not exiting properly. So that's why we got Brad. He's gonna do his magic, and then we're gonna give everybody a ride before we go to the track.
That's the best. What is it? That's great. What did it do? No, you hit full boost, And it was ripping, man.
Yeah, oh man, the
Second gear was crazy. The third gear just kept pulling. Yeah, that's pretty quick. That's pretty quick. That on like a big racetrack, that'd be pretty solid. Yeah, but you'd want a long track, not a tight track. Like,
No.
Cayuga's gonna be garbage.
Cayuga's garbage.
You want
It's
like
Mosport.
Mosport, yeah.
We got medium ratio here. Extra long gears are for like half-mile racing or roll racing.
Yeah, yeah.
The mid ratios are more suitable for a variety of racetracks and some like longer hill climb stuff. The power band is going to change dramatically with this. You'll
Yeah.
be in the boost the whole time. It's going to be mad.
Oh man,
Yeah.
that's
So,
awesome.
you know that gap between first and second?
Yeah.
And the power falls off, boost trickles.
Yeah.
You won't have that.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
when you went third to fourth, you know that feeling where
Yes.
it's pretty seamless. That's
Yeah.
you'll have that between all gears.
Only thing missing is that the two turbos, because before it would like put you in the seat and then it would put you in the seat farther when those turbos opened up. Can you see when turbo 2 opened up?
Was it compounding? Or how's,
Yeah. So
Yeah.
closer, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think I'm short boost down low. That's pretty, Peter. Nice.
So I mean, it's hard to tell from the outside,
Yeah.
but you spend a lot of money.
So this is where we're at. You guys remember Peter? Obviously the whole front of the video is him rebuilding our transmission. You did such a good job with our other transmission that
Thank you, sir.
it hasn't broken yet. But now that you've
Should have done those launches today.
we already hurt the motor.
Yeah, okay.
But you understand why we need a dog box.
Yeah, I think for getting the power to the ground, getting the torque to the ground properly, tightening up those ratios a little bit, and spreading across those 6 gears, you know the Audi's got a bad first to second. So
Yeah.
with this ratio set, you'll pull that all together. Instead of having nearly an overdrive on fourth, which is what your B5S4 would have had,
Yeah.
you're looking at 5th gear being an overdrive, and then 6th just over that. With this ratio set, you're going to keep that even 1st through 6th.
And I was debating on welding another bell housing in there, and I went back and watched the video on what I did, and I'm like, holy crap.
So you're going to have the 1 and 5/32 input shaft spline, 26 splines that is, and then you're going to be getting the adapter plate for the LS motor with the flywheel.
Okay.
So all you have to do is bolt up your pressure plate
Yeah.
and the clutch disc, and you'll be good to go.
Okay.
It's a little different to drive. Like you can go from 4th to 1st.
Oh yeah?
Yeah. You don't want to.
Yeah, my engine's not gonna like that.
No. So there are some nuances to driving a dog box, but when you're racing, flat out, they do perform well.
Okay.
Idling down the street, not good.
No way.
Yeah, they're just clunky, they're loud, but when you're racing, they're seamless.
So maybe you're wondering, what the heck did I just see? Why am I here? Well, if you go back way in the channel, we built way too complicated of an Audi Quattro, all-wheel drive 4-turbo LS swap race car. And it's kind of an ongoing science experiment, but it's getting close to reality of what I had in my head of acting the way that it was supposed to act. And it's putting a lot of smiles on our faces. So we're gonna keep carrying on with this thing until we have a race car that we can have some competitive fun with. If you haven't watched me cut up the original transmission in this, I actually shaved the ears off of this 01E that's in the car right now, welded the rim from a transport truck on there and the bell housing off of 4L80, and then made my own clutch to work with the whole system. This is a much better system. This transmission takes a generic clutch off of a LS. So I'm not gonna cut the bell housing off of this one. It actually took weeks to do that. By now we do have much better adapter plates, so we're getting one of those, but we don't have that one just yet. And we chose LS because we've blown up a couple already. We've overboosted it and popped a couple rings and overheated it a few times. So the idea is to have a good solid drive line in the car and then a spare in the trailer, because the way we built it, it only takes about 45 minutes to R&R an entire engine and transmission. It's pretty slick, but you'll have to stick around for that. No, and I really just wanted to emphasize and show you guys what's involved in a build like this. You've seen how much care and dedication Peter puts into his transmissions from Drive Sports, so check him out. If you have an Audi and you're looking to build something like this, give him a shout. But it goes to show that if you do one of these 10,000, 100,000 steps wrong, you can end up pretty disappointed. So we're slowly narrowing down all of the mistakes and trying to keep the car a little bit fresh, because every part does have an expiry date on it by how many times it goes around in a circle or gets hot and cold. So I'm excited to see where this is going to go and the races that we're going to do later this summer. So thanks for watching, guys. Appreciate every one of you guys. Check out all the other builds as well. There's a lot of stuff going on. First start on the Silverado, first start on the Bronco is right about now. And we've got lots of stuff going on with the hybrid kit. Body's done in paint. The 4-wheel drive is grafted over into the 2-wheel drive frame. So much good stuff happening. Fargo's happening. Skid steer's running on the other channel. I don't know, I might get some sleep in there at some point, but regardless, if you don't work on your stuff and you're just watching TV or you're slacking off, nobody's gonna do it for you. Get out there and work on it. Here we go.